It's A.R.I's Wednesday webinar series. This is the 11th that we've done thus far, and today I think will be the best yet. We've got 5 NFL players or ex-NFL players who are now all successful VCs or very active in VC, as Kelvin is. So why don't we get right to it with some introductions. Let's go by first name. So Courtney, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, Courtney Hall. I am venture capitalist with Hillcrest Venture Partners. We are a small micro-size VC fund based out of California and New York City. We invest in seed to growth stage ventures in the cloud infrastructure, SaaS, enterprise software space. We have 4 exits to our name right now, and we are raising our second fund. I played in the NFL with San Diego Chargers from 89 through 97. I was a captain, 4-time Pro Bowl first alternate. Also played at Rice University. And thank you very much, Zack, for inviting me here.
Thanks, Courtney. Courtney, you're so humble. Also, I don't know if you mentioned that you're 4-time All-Pro alternate and probably one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL at that time. And it's great to have you on A.R.I's advisory board as well. So thank you. Hunter, you're up next.
Sure. Thanks, Zack. Hunter Hillenmeyer. I played 8 seasons for the Bears in Chicago. During that time, I went to business school at Northwestern and finished both of those in 2010. And I've pretty much been in the VC world ever since, twice on the operating side and twice on the investing side. First at a Chicago-based VC fund called OCA Ventures, and now at a venture capital fund and fund of funds called Next Play Capital. Our founder at Next Play is another athlete, NFL guy turned investor in Ryan Neese. Our LP base also is very grounded in the sports world. We have 8 team owners as LPs, a lot of athletes, front office execs, family offices, groups like that. On the fund of fund side, we tend to invest mostly in blue chip venture capital funds that are access constrained, like Excel, Forerunner, Greylock, Founders Fund, First Round Capital. And then on the direct side, we tend to invest at a slightly later stage where we're usually co-investing alongside one of our managers in an instance where they would be doubling or tripling down on a B or C round in a high growth company. Next Play's been around since 2015. We're currently in the market for our 3rd fund. And I'll jump in a little more detail later. Thanks.
Great. Isaiah?
Thanks for having me as well, Zack, and awesome to be on this panel and get to know a lot of everyone on here, and it's great to get to know everyone else as well. But my background is founder of Will Ventures. Will Ventures is a venture capital fund focused on early stage seed, typically seed entry point investing, where we like to co-lead early on through a very unique lens of sports broadly defined, and the ability for sports to open up massive adjacent markets such as healthcare, fitness, digital media, IoT, et cetera. And kind of really crafted that from the ground up. It's the first institutional fund, which is a $55 million fund. Kind of do that. It's been just an amazing experience. Up to this point, being able to start that. Going back further, played 8 years in the NFL, and most of my time in Seattle, the Seahawks. Was never a superstar, was a grinder, but really, he was drafted 20 years ago actually, and spent 3 years learning everything I could on public and private markets, and started to invest 17 years ago, angel invest, and grew that to over 30 companies during my time in the NFL, where I embed myself into companies, and then be able to kind of grow over time with them, and just really be a fly on the wall from talented entrepreneurs, learning how to be an operator in those businesses. And that really led me on a path. By the time I retired in 2008, transition, went to Harvard Business School to get my MBA, and really knew I wanted to eventually start a fund, and wanted a path to be able to do that. Got some great advice from a couple of mentors of being an operator and being an entrepreneur first is one of the most important things you can be when you eventually want to move the other side. Being an investor, you can actually say, I was in your shoes, I know how hard it is to build a company, in the face of immense odds, just find a way. Just kind of amazing path through that, and met my co-founder at Will Ventures 10 years ago. We've now been involved with 4 different types of businesses, 2 on the operating, 2 on the investment side. And this is obviously starting a fund from the ground up. It's an immense challenge, which I know we can go on later on, but we're backed by 2 large university endowments, one out of Texas, one out of Boston, 9 professional team owners across 4 major sports, as well as a great blend of athletes across all major sports, as well as big players in VC, former entrepreneurs, private equity, and kind of hedge fund world, with that common thread of being able to kind of see how sports is opening up massive adjacent markets. Then I think a lot of people are starting to see that transform before our eyes.
Thanks, Isaiah. So Kelvin, you're up next, and you're the only active player on this panel. And you're on mute right now, but once you unmute yourself, I'd love to hear about what you're doing in VC. And just for what it's worth, a lot of folks I've talked to have said you're one of the smartest people they've met in the NFL, and just have a voracious appetite when it comes to all things business and VC. So just so you know, your reputation precedes you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Zach. Sorry I was late. Was being held up by a virtual tour of Microsoft's new product. So the nerding session went a little too long, but I'm learning from everybody on this call. First time meeting some, but have learned from Courtney and Isaiah and Hunter. Still playing, going into year 10. Can't believe I've been in the league for a decade. My body is starting to tell me that as well, but can't believe it's been a decade long. But for me, it's a learning process. It's been a journey, and it's been the discovery of different markets. Early stage, growth stage, late stage, pre-IPO, public markets, and trying to do it while I'm playing. But we talk about it on the football field all the time, and in locker rooms. You stand on the shoulders of those who came before you, and those who are on this call right now, or those who came before me, and laid the foundation for me to do what I do, and to gain the respect that I've gained within the industry, because they took the time to take meetings, and take meetings back in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s, and those meetings laid a foundation, and laid just almost a rail system for me to be able to go on and be able to kind of piggyback off of what they did. So I've learned from everybody on this call. Excited to share the stage and this panel with everyone. But for me, I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to ask. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned is not to be afraid of rejection. We've gotten rejected on the football field so many times. It's a way of life. And within the business world, there are times that, you don't get what you want. And you have to, get rejected, go find another way in the door. And I'm one of those ones. I'm willing to find a couple of the ways through the back door. So it's done me well.
Thanks, Kelvin. And last but not least, Tunde.
Thanks, Zach. And I really do appreciate being able to take part in this call. I've also been received some mentorship from the gentlemen on this call, Courtney and Hunter as well. I guess real quick background. I really was interested in technology, computers, and football growing up, which led me to Stanford. I was there in the early 2000s, and then football sort of took over just a little bit. I got to spend 4 years playing football. It was really I feel like I'm the perfect description of cup of coffee in the NFL. I was there for just a little bit, got to hang out for a little bit, shake some hands, and then it was over. And when it was over, I was trying to figure out what to do next, and started working at a startup, and worked there for 7 years, but also was an entrepreneur. Tried to be an entrepreneur and failed, and recognized how hard it was and wanted to know more, and ended up at the University of Chicago, Booth School of Business, studying entrepreneurship and finance. And it was there that my long-term goal was to be an investor, but I thought that maybe somewhat contrary to Isaiah, but not really. I wanted to be an entrepreneur first, successfully, and then be an investor. And I had several mentors at the school who said, you should be an investor now and just jump in. And so I shifted gears and really discovered that a lot of my interests coalesced around healthcare, and was fortunate enough to join Sandbox Industries, which is really a firm that implements innovation throughout the world here in Chicago, but we focus on several verticals: food and agriculture, insurance technology, and healthcare. And I spend most of my time with the healthcare team and the Blue Venture Fund, working closely with the Blue Cross Blue Shield health plan. So glad to be a part of the conversation today.
Happy to have you. One thing that everybody on this panel I think has in common is that we've all come from relatively humble beginnings. Some of us have had a real struggle, and we've all gotten to where we wanted to be. And I think we should definitely talk about that. And I'd like to dig in a little bit more into your backgrounds, because I'm sure people listening will be very interested in that. I'll just give a quick couple thoughts on my background and also some logistical items for today. So if anyone's listening and has questions, put them in the chat function. So not the Q&A function, but the actual chat. That would be helpful. And we'll try to get to some of those. And in terms of my background, I've been in the fixed income markets for a long time as an investor, trader, banker at large institutional managers like Deutsche Bank, Scotiabank, Sun Life Financial, and some others, but really saw an opportunity in the market about 2 years ago in venture debt. And venture debt is a strategy that's not really that well understood by the public, but it's gaining a lot of popularity. Essentially, think of it as loans with equity warrants attached to Series B, Series C, Series D, and beyond companies that are really looking for growth capital that's non-dilutive. So the debt actually complements the existing equity investors in the capital structure of these portfolio companies, and is really a facilitator of growth that's a lot cheaper. So people that build their companies can actually keep them. That's the end goal. I grew up in Boston, a single mom, basically got to where I am today through hard work and figuring out how to leverage my ability in the classroom and on the athletic field. So I wasn't nearly as good as these guys, but I played college basketball, and through that was able to have some real opportunities. And now we're raising a $500 million debt fund, and it's going quite well. So if you'd like to learn more about the strategy, you can check out ARIVC.com or email me at zellison@arivc.com. The takeaway really for investors is that it's returned, the strategy has returned roughly 20% annualized over the last 15 years. It's growing. It's a great portfolio diversifier, and the losses are typically less than 50 basis points a year, so 0.5% per year. So it's basically the best risk-adjusted returns you can find in the credit markets, period. So that's why I left the big shops to start this fund, because I feel like it's a home run opportunity, and it complements what all the folks on this call are doing on the venture equity side. So with that, let's dive in a little bit more to each of your backgrounds before we get to everything else. So Isaiah, I know that you have a very unique story. You've overcome a lot. If you care to elaborate on how you went from a relatively tough upbringing to Harvard, that would be great. I think a lot of people would like to hear that.
Yeah, no, I'm more than happy to. And I always like to say I've had a ton of help along the way, and a bunch of people that loved me and believed in me along the way too. Similar to what Kelvin always talks about, that I agree on it, which is there's just a lot of people that A, come before you, and as well as B, can help you along the way. That has really kind of happened. But I grew up in upstate New York and grew up in poverty, was homeless for parts of my childhood. I was the youngest of 5 kids, and realized that at a really young age that sports and academics were my way out. And I just did not, I remember thinking as a little kid, just not wanting to raise my family in that setting, and being able to have just normal things, hot water, and we didn't grow up with a TV, and telephone line that was going to get pulled, every other week, or, having to move 6 times when we did have a place, getting kicked out, not making rent. That burden of poverty, which, I'm not alone in, and, continue to, talk to more and more people around that. It's an extremely high motivator. And I know there's a lot of people on this call that can talk about that as well, but really motivated me a lot early on. And, as I fast forward, I would say ending up at Harvard as an undergrad was probably the last place in the world I ever thought I would have found myself. I literally remember taking a trip there, my senior year in high school, and just saying, well, this is a cool story to at least tell my grandkids at some point around that. But the fact is, I wasn't widely recruited coming out, and I kind of put my head down and commit myself to sports and in academics, like I said, and kind of look back and found myself in a way to actually getting a chance to actually gain entrance into a Harvard was amazing. But I remember taking that trip to Harvard and having a complete change in my perspective. I just thought people were going to be there with pocket protectors and legacies from where there was some of that, but in the end there was just an amazing mix of people from all different walks of life. Some very similar to how I grew up as well. It was just amazing. Experience going there, and then actually going to school there for the visit, and going to school there for that. It was just an amazing experience throughout. My father was a janitor, and he made $8,000 a year my senior year in high school, and to go through the experience around that and just have an amazing way in which kind of reformed and kind of retaught how I looked at the world, to teach me to feed this level of curiosity within myself that I never gave myself kind of this free reign to do. And that experience, besides, I always like to say, it doesn't matter where you went to school, it's still a piece of paper, right? A degree is a piece of paper. It's those experiences there and the most you get out of that. And it truly taught me to question everything and ask more questions over and over and over until it, I myself was exhausted from asking questions as well. So I think that kind of process going through there, it really changed how I looked at the world, and really changed even kind of being drafted in 2000 and being handed, by the Seahawks, and being handed a signing bonus of $275,000, not having any background in finance. I was a pre-med undergrad at Harvard, going through that and realized, if you guys have ever seen, read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, it was that very kind of moment of I know nothing. I was never taught anything growing up. So during that time from 2000 to 2003, be able to kind of, really learn everything from the ground up, not just hand it off to someone else and, have them figure it out, but very much like every single person on this call, which is, how do I learn as much as I can? How do I talk to as many people as I can? How do I read as many books as I can around all these different markets? And that kind of really led to, where I'm at today, which is this amazing, venture capital is the blending of so many different disciplines, but in the end, it's, the close interaction and adding value to amazingly talented entrepreneurs. And that's what I love about my job, and love the kind of day to day. So anyway, I appreciate you even asking the question, and thanks for the kind words, Zach, but that's kind of some of the path and some of my story as well growing up.
I think it's really helpful for people to hear that, especially younger folks, who are, trying to pave their way and maybe don't have it easy, just to be inspired by your story and the stories of others on this webinar. Courtney, let's talk a little bit about your background, how you grew up in Carson, California, and why you went to Rice and not USC. That was a great story that you told me offline.
Yeah, it's funny. And Kelvin's smiling there, who both Texas boys. He's probably wondering why I went there as well. No, listen, I grew up. So I think everyone on this call, I was a nerd growing up. There's no way around it. I was a nerd, and I happened to be good at football. I grew up in Carson, which is sandwiched between Compton and Long Beach. And I mentioned that to say I wasn't tough, but there were a lot of tough people that hung out around me. Still friends to this day. I grew up during the NWA period. But yeah, I was a math science guy, right? And I loved math. And one of my senior year quarterback was a guy named Jamel Holloway, who some of you guys may have heard about, probably one of the best option quarterbacks in the world. Sam Sutherland, who was freshman All-American at Stanford. Leroy Holt, who was a fullback at USC. Brett Young, rest in peace, who was a tailback cornerback at Oregon. And I was a nerd on the team, right? Undersized, and my dad died my senior year in high school. Had a lot of things I had to balance, whether I wanted to stay in LA. And my mom said, listen, you're an engineer. You want to be an engineer. And so you want to go to the best school possible and get the best education possible. And so again, going to Rice, which is one of a transformational time in my journey, really matured. Found a lot of mentors there. Vicki Bredhauer, mentioned some names. Vicki Bredhauer, Karen George, Jeff Rose, to name three people who really mentored me through my career there, and got my dual degree in econ and mana. And then I think, similar to Isaiah and a lot of people on this call, I came out and had a bonus, which I didn't know what to do. And then my agent, who was Marvin Dimoff, one of the superstar agents at the time, his son was Kevin Dimoff, who's I need to put a shout out to Kevin and Patty, his mom. And he said, listen, Courtney, you're a smart guy. So I'm going to give you names of three people, but I want you to manage your own portfolio. So I think, as everyone said here on this call, I went about just learning. And even people to this day, they ask me, well, what do you think about investments? I say, listen, I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm not going to tell you what to do, because the best thing you can do is to do your own research, learn as much as you can, and then on a risk-adjusted basis, make timely and careful investments. Never jump into anything with both feet. So that's what I did. And then after I said I didn't retire, I actually got fired from the Chargers. They figured out we've had enough to do with this guy, and I got my JD MBA from University of Chicago. And then I started and I.
Courtney, I think your video froze for a second. Let's see if we can get that unfrozen. In the meantime, while we're working on getting that,
So we operated that.
But sorry, Courtney, you froze up the last 15 seconds or so.
Okay.
But
anyway,
just a quick thought: while you're with the Chargers, you were the captain of the team and led them to their only Super Bowl in history, right? And now that they're in LA, it'll be the only San Diego Chargers Super Bowl team ever. And not only were you the captain, but you were also the players rep, right, for the team. You're still frozen a bit, unfortunately. But we're gonna loop back to you momentarily. Zoom stock is down about 2% on the news that Courtney's frozen. Should be down 5.
Anyway, hopefully you can hear me, and I'll cut it short. JD MBA, and actually I'm in New York City, and my wife's a federal judge here in the Eastern District. So it's kind of our background.
I appreciate that. And Courtney, you've been really helpful to A.R.I. You were one of our first advisory board members, and now we've built out a full 15-person advisory board, which we think is probably the best in the entire space. And you're a key reason why. So I always am appreciative of your help with that. Tunde, I wanted to go back to you. You didn't mention it yet on this call, but your background with your parents and what they thought about football and how you kind of turned them, or how football turned them, would be an interesting story, I think, for the audience.
Yeah, my parents are both from Nigeria, and so we're first generation here in the United States. And so growing up, we did everything at home. We hang out at home, and my parents weren't really comfortable with American culture. And so when I started playing football, my mom was dead set against it. Absolutely not. No way. Like, school is more important. Um, and she was that way until a coach from Harvard came to the school to interview my coach. And when she heard about that, it literally overnight, everything changed. And it became all like, Mom, can I get a job? No, you can't get a job. You've got a job. You play football, and those kinds of things. And so I was really focused on that. And they were, of course, really supportive of, both my educational interests and my football interest. But to this day, my parents are bigger football fans than I am. Like, they root, cheer, scream, and it's pretty amazing.
So Kelvin, let's go to you and learn a little bit about your background. So you went to SMU in Texas. How did you wind up there, and how did you get into football, and how did you wind up at SMU?
I wound up at SMU because my mama told me to. Growing up in Mahia, similar to some of the folk stories on here, grew up in poverty, and there was no access, no exposure there in Mahia, other than, working some type of manual labor or working in the field, running cattle or things of that nature. And, got an offer, went to SMU, that was a big thing in Mahia at the time. Went on a visit and they gave us an offer, but they told us if we give you this offer, you can't go visit any of the other schools that you have lined up after this. And we're driving home, and my dad asked my mom, so, what did you think about SMU? And she just said, hey, that's where he's going to school. So that's where I went to school. And it turned out to be something special for me. But, had both parents, was blessed to have both parents in my household. Oldest of four. I was the guinea pig. So I was the first child out the house. So it was a big deal to one, go to college, but it also set the table for my siblings after me. But struggled going to SMU, coming from the country and going to the city, just with, culture, with the way people lived in that particular arena. I'm not gonna say horse and buggy in Mahia, but, it wasn't no Maseratis and Lamborghinis and, all types of, oil and gas money that was thrown around on the campus of SMU. So it was a culture shock when I got there. And once I got, with some great people, Laura White, who was a senior VP of student affairs, and Jennifer Jones, she was over at the multicultural affairs, and Jane Preston, which was my academic advisor, just had some great people that surrounded me, had some great coaches that, just kind of pushed me in the right direction, literally pushed me in the right direction, which was super helpful early on in my journey.
It's a great story. I mean, it's so good to hear about people who've come from humble beginnings. I mean, my mom was a radio announcer back in the 80s and 90s in Boston. I've never met my dad. He's never been in the picture. And so she raised me by herself, and being a radio announcer as a woman at that time was harder than being an NFL player. I mean, it was about the same number, 0, right? And it wasn't easy for her because men dominated that industry, and a lot of the value she created was actually taken from her and given to men in the organizations that she worked at. I won't name them right now, but big radio stations in Boston, some of the biggest, in fact. So, I spent most of my childhood in poverty too, and I was only able to get to where I am because I got a full scholarship to a private high school in Boston called Beaver Country Day, which athletes will remember, because we had a guy named Wayne Turner who was one of the top point guards in the country, the same class as like Kevin Garnett, and went to Kentucky to play for Pitino. And I was the guy that came in after him and played there for 4 years as the starting point guard. So then through that, was able to get to Swarthmore College, small Division III school that I really liked because they were just really strong academically. And I had Division I opportunities as well, but I knew I wasn't going to play professionally. So went all in on academics, and like you guys have just been a lifelong learner, right? I mean, that's the lesson I always tell younger folks, and they're like, what do I do when I get out of college? And I said, look, when you get out of college, nobody really cares about your success anymore. In college, people are there to handhold you because you're paying them a lot of money typically. But once you're out, aside from your parents and maybe a couple family members or significant other, nobody cares how you do, right? It's all on you, and you have to earn it. And nobody's going to tell you the path, and nobody's going to tell you what you need to do. You just have to hustle every single day, read as much as you can, learn as much as you can by talking to people, find some good mentors if you can. You know, I was lucky in that regard. I had a great mentor who I met playing basketball in middle school. He's in his 80s now, Fred Burrell. He was a bus painter for the MBTA, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority. And he grew up in Mission Hill, which is like the hardest area in Boston. And basically just took me under his wing, and it started with basketball, but really became much more than that. And he's become a lifelong mentor. And without him and my mother, who's fantastic, I would have never been able to get to this stage. You know, so I didn't mention this, but we've got a bunch of folks from all the top schools. We've got 3 Chicago MBAs on this call, right? Courtney, Tunde, and myself. Hunter went to Northwestern for his MBA, you know, the other school in Illinois, we like to say. Isaiah, you know, double Harvard, and Kelvin SMU, and you know, plenty ahead. I'm sure you'll be able to go wherever you want if you even decide to go. You won't even need to, right? Yeah, I think we've all been able to do this because we work hard and we continue to learn, and are appreciative of the opportunities that we're given.